Hello and welcome to Shy Talk, an Irish history podcast. My name's Kevin Larney, and here in the studio with me today is...
I can't lie to them. I can't. I'm not. We're in separate locations. They know as well.
Neither of which is a studio.
Yeah, no, don't. That's not fair. I actually am in a studio. I'm in my production studio.
Well,
that's you're in your house. I'm in my workplace, in my office, in an actual full-fledged production studio.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah. Although I feel like you can't really tell too much of a difference anymore because thanks to the listeners, we've got Kevin a good microphone.
Yes, and I built this sound booth around me, which I don't know. I think it does actually do something.
Oh, I think, the proof is in the pudding. And while I'm eating that pudding, I'm listening to this podcast and I can tell that the quality of the audio has gone up significantly. Having said that, we should give a shout out to all the people who helped buy that microphone at Shite Talk History at buymeacoffee.com.
Yes, last week I said something like, if you really don't like the podcast, send us some angry fivers just to really stick it to us. You know, as a joke. And then as soon as the episode went up, we got 2 fivers and...
By the same person. He really hates us.
That's right. The same person gave us 2 fivers instead of a tenner, which really felt like it was a pointed attack.
Yeah, no, because I saw that come in as a donation. I was like, this is weird. Maybe he just figured it out. And then I listened to the podcast back and I heard your intro because I wasn't around. I was like, yeah, this guy is spot on. This guy's on the ball.
I like to think that it was a coincidence and he hadn't even heard this episode yet.
No, that Owen was, he had definitely heard. I shouldn't give out his name for its GDPR purpose. Okay, I've already given it cats out of the bag. Owen M. Gave some...
That's a bit obvious though.
So, okay, E. Mangan.
Yeah, that'll do.
Is that our first listener shout out?
Oh, is it? Yeah, or
by name.
Maybe.
Yeah, we've broken. I feel like I've broken my oath as a journalist, but it's too late now.
The first person to send us a fiver after this episode goes out, we'll breach your privacy as well. You can pick either your first name or last name, and we'll read it out. But Jason, I reckon that me and you were 2 young, hip, tech-savvy gentlemen with our finger on the pulse of a generation. We've decided to set up a Facebook account in the year 2020.
Hot damn! It's gonna live right there on the internets, right beside our MySpace and Bebo page. If you're not a fan of paying for content, maybe you could download our podcast through Napster. There's a multitude of ways to find this.
Yeah, I'm gonna start uploading episodes to LimeWire now. XXX, Shite Talk, Rasta Remix, Bob Marley, XXX, Virus. LimeWire. Remember you used to be able to download LimeWire Pro from LimeWire?
That's the internet eating itself.
But so we've got a Facebook page at Shite Talk History. There's nothing there as of yet, but soon there will be.
Yeah, give it a like, and we'll start to put more content there. There'll soon to be a Twitter page, and we'll be on all of the social medias, but never Snapchat or TikTok.
I think they're gone now.
I think they're going to get more popular, but I'm drawing the line in the sand right there. We will do Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and that's it.
Famously, lines in the sand are eroded quite quickly. So
lines in the body sand.
I'll see you in TikTok in 2021.
But I think is that all of our housekeeping? You can follow us at Shite Talk History anywhere you want it now, or you can email us at shitetalkhistory@gmail.com.
Yeah. So I'm conscious we made a big deal last week of this being the last episode in the series on the War of the Two Kings. But then we recorded this one and it was about 4.5 hours, so we've had to split it into 2 episodes. Which means that next week will be the final episode, and it will be the final episode this time because it's already recorded. And that'll be about the Battle of Oghrim. But for this week's episode, we've got part 5 on the 12th series, all about Patrick Sarsfield and the Siege of Limerick. Each of these episodes has kind of been standalone because we've done a recap at the start of each one about the other episodes. But you're going to like this, I think. I've deployed a literary device. I'm going to do a recap through a character who we haven't introduced yet.
Oh.
But will be a main player in this episode.
I like this.
It's pretty good. It's actually convenient because I wanted to bring him into this. And I was like, oh, he's actually been involved in every event thus far. But here we go, Jason. Here's the story of Patrick Sarsfield.
Okay. I imagine he's part of the Sarsfield clan that has the links to the soccer team Vélez Sarsfield in Argentina. He would have been part of that, I believe. Or one of his ancestors would have been.
Probably. But so Patrick Sarsfield was from a wealthy Roman Catholic family of English descent. His great-great-grandfather had been knighted for, well, it's unclear why, but apparently he was helping the crown against rebellious Gaels. And he used that money that he got from the crown to
Sorry,
buy...
that sounded like rebellious gays. Oh, those rowdy, rambunctious gays. Always at it.
It was the 1540s, and the gays figured it was their turn in the sun. No, he was fighting against rebellious Gaels, rebellious Irishmen. And he used the money that he took from the crown to buy Lucan Estate, and then also some other estate in Kildare.
Oh.
So then his grandson, Patrick Sarsfield's father, who's also called Patrick Sarsfield, he took a different approach, and he sided with Charles I against Cromwell and the British Parliament during the Confederate Wars, which I guess is not that different. He just sided with a different British king. But that resulted in the family lands being taken away from them when the Royalists lost and Charles went into exile. After the wars were over and the Stuarts got back in the monarchy, the Sarsfield family wasn't able to claim back all their land because of the part in the wars, but his eldest son, William, so our Patrick Sarsfield's brother, he married Mary Crofts, who was supposedly Charles II's illegitimate daughter, because her mother was Charles's main mistress, Lucy Walter, who had like 4 children. The royal lineage is very difficult to follow, but they all had
It really isn't. It starts with one family tree, and then you never have to leave that family tree.
It just becomes a family circle at some point.
Yeah.
But so I think she wasn't acknowledged, Mary Crofts, but she was probably his illegitimate daughter, so that came with certain perks, which meant that the Sarsfield family got their land back. They got the land back on the condition that whoever was living there, once they died, it would return back to the Sarsfield clan.
Okay.
In the 1670s, with the secret Treaty of Dover that we talked about, Charles II agreed to support...
The not-so-secret Treaty of Dover.
No, not so secret, because it's on Wikipedia. I mean, that's like, rule 1 of espionage. Don't publish your things on the internet. But Charles II agreed to support France in an attack on the Dutch Republic. He made a deal with Louis of France to double-team the Dutch Republic, and in 1672, Sarsfield fought over there on the French side against the Dutch and against a young William of Orange.
Was that was he just Billy of Orange then?
He was Billy of Rhine.
Billy of Tangerine. He hadn't quite ascended yet.
He was only a young seed. So when Sarsfield returned to London after the wars, he was caught up in the Popish plot by Titus Oates, who, yeah, I think to date still is the best name in this whole saga. But
the best name ever.
That is true. And his co-conspirator, Israel Tongue, who I don't see mentioned as often, but another fantastic name.
Now, tell me this. What do you think happened to Israel Tongue's tongue that made him think, like, what I need to do is stay so close to the obvious here. Like, that man has a wooden tongue, or something's gone on, and he's like, if I make my name, like, that would be like saying, my name is Devon, Italy, not a traitor. I see what you've done here, Mr. Wooden Tongue, Israel Tongue.
Israel Tongue. We'll have no more questions about my partner's tongue. It is, as he said, Israel Tongue. I'd like... The whole way during the Popish plot, he just kept sliding a piece of paper across the desk to Titus Oates.
Yes. I'll talk whatever I want.
Mention the tongue. And of course, as already mentioned, my partner's tongue, Israel. Yes, I mentioned the tongue. It was all we talked about in day 12. We really need to get back to this Catholic witch hunt.
Remember, you kept waving your arms around and saying...
So in closure, tongue is real, oats are tight, Catholics bad. Thank you very much. So Charles, so Sarsfield, Oates named Sarsfield as another one of the like Catholic conspirators, which meant there was a target on his back. And then once the test laws were introduced by Charles, Sarsfield and all other Catholics were barred from entering the military, which means that he now lost his main way of making money, / his only way of making money. So now he was broke and had nothing to do. He spent a little bit of time trying to get... So the Lucan estates had passed to his brother, and his brother had died, and they passed to his brother's sons. So he spent some time, I think, trying to sue them to get ownership of the estate, because why not?
Because why not?
But then after that fails, he goes back to London in 1681, and he makes 2 separate attempts to abduct a heiress. And now that I'm reading that, I don't actually know if it was 2 different heiresses or 1 heiress. Twice.
No, it was one heiress, and then a woman called Grace.
Sure. Well, listen, at this stage, we're just splitting heiresses.
Well, no, he needed some heiresses and graces about him.
Well, it seems like he might have had some heirs and graces about him. He came back from war, and his 2 first acts as a man with no money. I mean, we've been in a situation where the money dries up. You had to find a new line of work. His immediate reaction was to go home and try and steal his family plot of his nephews, and then when that failed, he went over to London and tried to kidnap a woman, or possibly 2 women.
Who hasn't?
Listen, he who hasn't sinned cast the first stone, you know. But it all turned around for him when Charles II died and was succeeded by James II in 1685. Sarsfield helped James suppress the Monmouth Rebellion, and that was one of the rebellions we talked about before, where because James was openly Catholic, as soon as he was put in charge, there was different Protestant factions who wanted to find a new king, any king. And one in particular had picked one of Charles II's illegitimate Protestant sons called James Scott.
The Gendry.
He was the Gendry, yes. And I think he was the Earl of Monmouth or whatever, so they all rallied around him and tried to get him on the throne.
When people rally behind a bastard, then do you become a legitimate bastard?
I think you do. You become a legitimate bastard then after that. But Sarsfield helped James put down this Monmouth rebellion, and he was back in the game. James tried to remove the Test and Penal Laws Acts, and he was looking for a couple of good young Catholics to put into the army. So Sarsfield's got a leg up. And in 1688, he had his own cavalry unit, which is apparently pretty good. So later on that same year...
I thought you were going to say, which is apparently a group of horses.
I haven't looked into it, but I think that's what that is. So later on that year in 1688, the Immortal Seven had written their letter to William, asking him to come over and get rid of James for being a Catholic. James knew about this in advance, so he sent Sarsfield over to Ireland, where our old friend Fighting Dick Talbot was now the Lord Lieutenant. He sent Sarsfield over to Dick to ask him for more men to fight against William. And Talbot said no. We need the men here.
Yeah, which I mean,
it is reasonable. So as this story comes on, this will become a sort of a theme. But Sarsfield and Talbot didn't get on. They were both in exile with James and the Stuarts when they went into exile.
Bastards!
You do love exile. So but these are all they're all part of a gang. There's like the exile gang who all just hung out in the French court with the Stuarts. And now that James and Charles are back in power, they're all getting dividends. But Sarsfield fails anyway and heads back to James empty-handed. So he couldn't get any more men, and by November, William has landed in England, and he's challenging James II for the throne. Sarsfield took command of the British forces in the Wincanton Skirmish, which, as well as being probably one of the most British things I've ever read, was one of 2 actual conflicts in William's invasion that produced casualties, a total of around 18 people. The Wincanton Skirmish was not as tough as it sounded.
They're the numbers I like hearing.
Yeah.
Giant battle, 4,000 injured, 20 dead.
Despite such resounding victories, James ends up losing the entire battle because pretty much everyone on his side just defected to William's side as soon as he landed. So James flees to France in December. In January of the following year, 1689, Sarsfield follows him into exile in France. This whole event was known as the Glorious Revolution. Also, I think, sometimes called the Bloodless Revolution because
no one
which
died.
Is very disrespectful to those 18 to 30 men who died in the entirety of an invasion of a different force.
You don't know that blood was shed. They could have all died from natural causes. Fair. It could have been shock.
It could have been
old age. Just so happened to be the day of the battle. I'm not gone croaked.
No one knows when the Grim Reaper will strike. It could be while you're out shopping for oranges, or it could be on the morning of a battle, where nothing would have happened.
Actually, no, he did die, but it wasn't the decapitation that killed him. He actually had a heart attack directly before the Axeman swung.
There was a bad batch of shrimp going around then. You know what they say, never trust Winkington shrimp.
I think he would have survived the shotgun to the head, only the sound it produced gave him such a shock. You know, Johnny's heart wasn't in a good way, and it just, for the life of him. Sure, that's the life gone.
That was the life of him. So, now Sarsfield is in exile with James, and at the age of 34, he decides, enough of this bachelor life, it's time to get married. So he found a 15-year-old child called Honora Burke, and they got hitched. That's not relevant to the story, but I think as this story gets on, the fact that these middle-aged men were marrying 15-year-old girls, it's certainly become a trend.
Did he marry them, or was he just on a plane with them, traveling to an island 15 times with the girl? This is how they're going to try and pull the Clintons down, Kevin. Just because these are just connections you're making in your crazy head, Kevin.
Yeah, that is fair. That is fair.
So renege what you said.
We don't really know what happened. Sarsfield, he married a 15-year-old girl. We don't know all the details. Sure, she was a child, but
she grew up in Eastern Europe, and they're emotionally a lot more developed than a regular 15-year-old from Ireland or England. They have to drown puppies when they're 9 because they can't afford to keep the litter. That's it's a thing. They're hardened individuals.
It's all part of the tradition. I know it. You know it. It's just basic mads. What's this? The 7 year plus 1, and then you add on another 10 for every century that's gone by. 7
years plus 1, and then they're probably they're of age. I think that's the Clinton.
You know the old rule, yeah. 7 years plus 1 is 8, and that's good to go. Yeah. So in March of 1689. Sarsfield returned to Ireland with James and a host of French troops when they landed at Cork to retake the throne. Sarsfield was elected to Dublin County in the Patriot Parliament of that May, and he ended up commanding cavalry units across Ulster during the War of the Two Kings. Not successfully, but he did command them. When an Irish contingent was to be sent to France in October of that year, Deveau, who was, remember, he was the French count who was there counselling James in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
He was Louis' man on the ground. And when there was an Irish contingent to be sent to France in October of that year, Deveau suggested Sarsfield for the command. He said that, although Sarsfield is not of noble birth, he has distinguished himself by his ability, and his reputation in this kingdom is greater than that of any man I know. He is brave, but above all, he has a sense of honor and integrity in all that he does. Was that flawless?
It's a flawless French-Canadian accent.
I am from Montreal. Where is my poutine? Gaston.
It's for any fight fans. Kevin's just doing his best George St. Pierre. It's brilliant. I love it.
Well, thank you. So, the cliff notes from that are... Deveau thinks that Sarsfield is a man of honour, integrity and courage, and puts him forward to lead this battalion into France. James says no, because although James agrees that Sarsfield is brave, he also said that he was very scantily supplied with brains.
That's the first time I've ever heard that insult.
Yes.
It's great when you're able to talk that cogently and flowery, but also most of the time people don't want to hear it. That's kind of like someone intelligent would say, "Do you see that guy over there? He rides around on the crest of a wave of his own self-importance." I'd be more likely to say, "See that lad over there? He's a thick shite."
Well, this was before you couldn't just come out and say he was a thick shite. You had to say he was very... one finds that, although undoubtedly brave, Sarsfield is very scantily supplied with brains.
I can't bring in that flowery language.
Yeah.
I gotta just slip back to base.
So Sarsfield didn't get the job. He ended up staying on in Ireland. He didn't have much to do in the Battle of the Boyne, but when the Jacobites lost that battle and James fled back to France, Sarsfield stepped up and took a more central role in the Jacobite forces. And there you go. That's brought us up to... That's covered the last 4 episodes of this.
Ah, fair play to the listeners.
Do you remember any of this stuff?
Yes, but there's a lot.
Well, listen, Sarsfield lived through it all. But, so we're up to the end of the Battle of the Boyne. The defeat of the Battle of the Boyne had broken James's spirit, even though not that many people had died. He was done with it, so he fled the country thinking that the war was over.
I had only accounted for 10 deaths. No!
Yeah. I only thought I'd have to count up on 2 hands. Once it went into defeat, it was done. When it went into defeat, it was defeat.
I already have gout. I'm already down to only 18. I can't get... No more. Retreat. If we lose any more, we'll never be able to keep track.
Fetch me that abacus. Yeah, so despite the relatively low casualty numbers, I think we said last week 2,000 people died in a 40,000 people battle. So I think 1,500 of them were Jacobites. James calls it a day. He heads back to France. And around 4 weeks after the Battle of the Boyne, King William flaunts into Dublin unopposed, and the rest of the Jacobite forces flee west across the Shannon. So the remaining Jacobites are split into 2 camps. There was the Peace Party, who wanted to negotiate a deal with William at this stage. They thought that they could get some of the Catholic lands back. They thought they could get Catholics in some positions of authority. And that was headed up by Dick Talbot. So, old fighting Dick, he's ready to put down his fists.
The Peace Party, led by a man whose his name begins with fighting.
His nickname was Fighting Lion Dick Talbot. And that man's heading up the Negotiate Party. So...
Hey, look, I think to be fair, Kev, the heads of the actual peace process probably didn't have completely dry hands themselves.
Fair enough. Well, if that's who's heading up the Peace Party, you can only imagine who's heading up the War Party. It's Patrick Sarsfield. So him and his side figured they could get a better deal by fighting, which is
usually the
probably always true.
Yes, always the case. Be it in war, be it in contract negotiations in your work, be it in trying to get into a bar and being refused by a bouncer. Fighting is always going to, in the long run, benefit your claim.
I cannot tell you how many times, Jason, in my life, I've seen a drunk teenager at 1 a.m. shout at a bouncer, and just, there's always this moment, which I love it. There's a look of realization comes over the bouncer's face, and he says, you know what? You're right, kid. I am a jackass, and then lets them in.
Yeah. Well, usually he'll say something like, go get a coffee and come back later. And then if you do go and get a coffee and come back afterwards, they will let you in.
Yeah, very few people actually take them up on that offer, but it does work.
Because they're drunk. And it's so funny if you walk back a half an hour later with a coffee. And my suggestion, bring one for them.
They would like that.
Yeah, bring an extra one. Bring one for them, bring one for you. To explain your case. Look, man, I understand now, we had a bad situation there earlier, but can you see now that I'm just trying to go in? You can actually talk to bouncers. You just cannot be an idiot.
No. I mean, very few people have ever tried it, but I've done it a few times with friends, and it's pretty... I remember the last time I had to get a coffee, we were trying to get into the workman's, I think, and my friend was quite drunk, and the bouncer was like, mate, tie up your shoe, because one of his shoelaces was untied, and he bent over, untied his other shoe, tied it back up a little bow, and then stood up with such a look of triumphant, just such a look of accomplishment on his face, as if to say your move, Mr. Bouncer, I can tie a knot, let me into your club. But in that case we went and got a coffee and came back with a coffee receipt, and we got in. And
not even a coffee. You brought the receipt back.
Yeah, you brought the receipt. You don't have to bring the whole coffee back. It's implied that you drank it.
Smell my breath. Yeah.
No, underneath the buckfast.
Yeah.
No.
Behind the
vomit. Yes.
Yeah. And the cigarettes.
What other tones are you getting?
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I haven't brushed my teeth all week.
Sure, why would I brush them? I'm only going to get them dirty again.
So, much like everyone in Ireland after half two and the bounces of this country, Sarsfield and Talbot did not get along, as previously established. I don't know where it all started off. They were in exile in the Stuart court together. I don't know. They weren't friends. They didn't like each other. I think Talbot was quite a bit older than Sarsfield, but who knows. But now they found themselves on either side of the remaining Jacobite forces. One wants to deal, one wants to fight.
The whole thing's been decided by Noel Edwards.
He was there with 20 boxes. Each one of them had a treaty inside of it, except for one which had a gun. So as we talked about in previous episodes, this whole thing is just the start of the 9 Years' War, where Louis XIV is trying to take over Europe. This is just the sort of opening gambit in this battle. So elsewhere in Europe, around about the time of the Battle of the Boyne, on the 1st of July, the French had just defeated the Augsburg Alliance, which is like the Dutch, the English, the Spanish, parts of the Holy Roman Empire, like everyone on the other side against France. The French had just beaten them at Flanders, which was in the Spanish Netherlands.
Do you mean the world?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just I think it's France and the Ottoman Empire against everybody. France had just got a victory in Flanders, which at this time was in the Spanish Netherlands, which apparently is part of... I don't know when was the last time we looked at a 16th century map of Europe, but it is very difficult to figure out what's going on.
Flanders is now part of Belgium, right?
Yeah, so...
Because you've got Flanders and Wallonia. What's the other...
Is that where Waluigi comes from?
No, that's Italian. You racist.
No.
mofo.
Mario was Italian. Waluigi, I think, was Waldonian. That's why they never got along, because of this ancient conflict.
I think you're thinking of Wario, but...
oh, well, the less said about that devil, the better.
Waluigi would have been the nemesis of Luigi.
Yeah, but listen, my brother's nemesis is my nemesis. You know how the old Italian phrase goes.
Your brother's nemesis is Wal Philip.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah, he's actually pretty sound. But if you look at the 16th century map of Europe, nothing looks recognizable really on mainland Europe, apart from France. Everything else is broken into these loads of different provinces. France pretty much looks like France, it does currently. But the Spanish Netherlands is now split into like Belgium, Luxembourg, parts of what we know as the Netherlands, Holland, and then Germany and France. But at the time, it was a bit of land north of France and south of the Dutch Republic that the Spanish owned.
Well, I don't know enough about their history because I don't know why it's not called Holland, because I grew up with it being called Holland, and as a soccer team they were always referenced as Holland. And then the other day in the office, my boss was telling me about some documentary she was watching that referenced I think it was set in the Netherlands, but when she had said, she's like, it's set over in Holland, and instantly I went, I don't know if we're allowed to be saying that now. That seems like an old term to be. I was like, wait, hold on a second. What am I talking? It's a country that's predominantly like 6'2" white people who have a bunch of money. I was like, I'm not being offended for them in any way.
Sure, yes. I think they only said it recently. And yeah, I got confused in the research for this. But then, as we've seen, Jason, this has already gone on 5 episodes long. I did find myself with 3 or 4 tabs open on the Spanish Empire and the Habsburg Empire and the Dutch Republic. I was like, what are you doing? What the fuck are you at? Get back on track. I'd gone deep into the weeds again on basically everything else about the 9 Year War has been cut from this story because it's not relevant. It's too long. It went on for 9 years, which is how long this podcast will happen. Unless we stick to the Irish stuff.
Oh, could you believe imagine our weekly listeners who are like, oh, I love this. Every week a new story. Every week a new quick fun story. And then waiting for season 4, just waiting. And then it drops. Hey, month and a half of this.
I really like quirky stories. I wonder what happened in Mullingar maybe in the 1920s. So in 1671, the Prince of Wallachia bespoke of the finance minister from what is currently known as Croatia, but at the time was New Hofskenberg. Now, they were cousins, but also one of them was 14. That sets the tone for what was going to happen in Northern Macedonia. Now, remember that guy I told you about 7 hours ago? Prince Finnsburg? that guy comes back into it hard.
Actually, sorry, that was a conversation I was having outside of the podcast. Let me fill you in.
Here's a 3-episode tangent. But I think, so the Netherlands is the sort of, at the time, Holland, I think, was a district in what was the Dutch Republic, which was a bunch of different districts put together, including like Maastricht and Utrecht.
And Red Light.
And then, yes, the Red Light was one of the more famous ones. And each district would pick its own stadtholder, but most of the time they'd pick someone from the House of Orange, and a lot of the time each district would pick the same stadtholder, so that person would end up becoming a de facto leader of the Dutch Republic, which was what William, Prince of Orange, was. None of that's relevant. What was important was that France had just won a big victory in the Spanish Netherlands, right outside King William's hometown. King Billy had left the defence of his home country to Prince Waldeck. I realise now when I was making fun of this sort of stuff like 2 seconds ago, this is exactly what I'm talking about right now. But, so King Billy had to leave the defence of his home Dutch Republic to Prince Waldeck, and Waldeck got badly defeated, lost half the men, and then on the 10th of July, the French Navy defeated the combined Dutch-English Navy at the Battle of Beachy Head, so they temporarily controlled the English Channel, which is a huge deal. And that happened the day before the Battle of the Boyne. I had read in one place that maybe he'd purposely run away from the Battle of the Boyne in order to mount a naval attack on England, which I think is probably the most generous rewriting of history that I've come across so far. So all this stuff is happening in mainland Europe on the side of Louis, which essentially the Jacobites are on that side. So everything's going well in general. And also, once King Billy gets into Dublin, he issues the Declaration of Finglas, where he asks for the surrender of Jacobite forces.
Sorry, it's too good a name. The Declaration of Finglas, read as such. Here! Would you listen to me for a second?
The first paragraph was just, man, trust him with me fucking life, man. With me fucking life. King Billy's a fucking legend. But, so he issues the Declaration of Finglas asking for the surrender of Jacobite forces. He basically says that any of the rank and file guys who surrender within like the next week, they get off free, they get a pardon. But it's not the same for the officer class. They're all going to be punished. For some reason, like, that made the army not want to surrender. That sort of strengthened the Jacobite resolve. Presumably because they were getting fed this information. Like, the rank and file guys were getting fed this information from their bosses.
Yeah.
If it was in modern times, that would have just been broadcast on radio or whatever, and they would have been able to make up their own minds. But presumably they're being read this by their officers.
Yeah, history was real shit before you had, like, access to the internet and information.
You know, those cowards, they're offering us a deal. They think we're stupid enough to take it. They say, you can all walk free, and all you have to do is turn over me, your general. Basically, a father to you all. I say we stick it to them, boys. No one's getting paid anytime soon. Yes, we're all going to have to live in a trench, but by God, it will be worth it. It's better than succumbing to those dirty foreign bastards. Yes, I am from France. Why do you ask?
Do you think most of that speech would have been given as he was crowd surfing his way towards the opposition?
He's just being hoisted over a wall with a delivered to William sign on him. But yeah, so for some reason, a combination of the harsh surrender terms and the fact that Louis' side is doing pretty good in Europe, which means like there could be reinforcements coming in, there's a possible victory coming for them. These two things lends credence to like Sarsfield's war party argument, and so the Jacobites decide to establish a defensive line along the Shannon, and they dig in and they set up their forces in Limerick. But in early August, General Antoine Camont, who I kept calling Camus in the other one because I didn't read his name properly, but he's the guy who replaces Davos and Conrad von Rosen. He's like, I think at this stage he's the top French military guy in Ireland.
Numero un.
He declared that Limerick could have been taken by roasted apples. Now, I don't know if he meant that the weapons would have been roasted apples or he could have been taken by literal roasted apples. But he leaves for Galway along with Talbot and a lot of the people on the peace party side. And they all head to France, possibly to get back up, or possibly they just go to France. But they abandon the Jacobite cause temporarily, which means that now Sarsfield is pretty much in charge. Also, when Camont replaced Devoe and Von Rosen, Devoe told him that the Irish were a poor-spirited and cowardly people whose soldiers never fight and whose officers will never obey orders.
Just wait about 200 years. The people of his nation would be eating those words.
But also here's Camont doing that exact thing, running off at the hour of need. But he is a much cooler guy than Devoe, and this is another thing where I went into the weeds on, like, this guy is a really fascinating story. He's just this sort of general in Ireland, but that was probably not even in the top 10 interesting things about him. Apparently, back when he was in France, he was the only love interest of Anne-Marie Louise d'Orléans, who was described as one of the greatest heiresses of Europe at the time, had a massive fortune and was unmarried and was like turning down proposals from all the royalty of Europe, including Charles II, and all because she'd fallen in love with Camont, who was like a lowly count.
As much shit as I'll give the French, like French women, like there's just because they don't want you. They're like, I just want your affection. Give me your affection, and they won't. They won't ever do it. I'm like, I'm putty in their hands, and I hate it every single moment of it. But damn, French women just have me.
Well, this is exactly what's happened. Like, here comes the English king, Charles II, probably brought over some posies or something to try and woo this woman, and she says no. She turns down like princes and kings from all across Europe, and all because she loves Camont, who is a count and is described as being fascinatingly ugly, which I feel like that's the French
they always
type.
Are that they don't care about looks. You know, they care about like how much do you hate yourself and how much can you overcome that. I don't know, like
which is exactly, if you are, you know, if you're like not conventionally attractive but still attractive, nonchalant. It's basically even the word nonchalant. They made the whole thing up.
Yeah, they've got the sexiest ever way of saying nothing. Nonchalant. Just act cool, act nonchalant. You're like, oh my god. Oh, that sounds so sexy. Nonchalant. I can't even be chalant. I can't even be. I'm not even.
You're constantly chalant.
No, I can't.
All chalant.
I'm manic, is what I am, because I'm not cool enough. I'm not suave enough to even say suave, let alone chalant, let alone be nonchalant. They've got that certain je ne sais quoi.
Well, that's it. So all the words that we've taken from France, like ennui, je ne sais quoi, nonchalant, they're all just words to describe the things that we can't be.
Yeah.
Just this detached coolness that we can't even explain succinctly without stealing their goddamn words for it. I'm getting riled up just thinking about it, which is not very cool. It's pure chalant. But Charles probably came over like me, all riled up, ready to impress this woman, and she was like, no, I love another. And she'd fallen for this guy who was, you know, handsomely ugly. But because he's a count, he's seen as being way below her stature. So she has to go to Louis XIV and ask his permission to marry him, which causes a big scandal in the court. But it's just like in all the great love stories, Jason, just like in the movies, love triumphed. And Louis threw Camont in prison so that she could marry someone of a better stature.
So that's the fourth element of the Dan Harmon story cycle.
Oh yeah?
I thought we're just like, you said, just like the movies. So I think that's a basic story structure. That would be your directly after Go, I believe, or no, to move after Go. It's right before things start to take an upturn. It'll come.
No, it doesn't come around.
It will.
He spends 10 years in prison.
Yeah,
and then she marries someone else.
And then
he comes out and he goes to Ireland to fight.
And then?
No, they never get married.
Ah.
Yeah. Because she's mega rich and he's some weird, ugly but handsome dude.
Wait, are you telling me that all of those relationships that I've ended over the years because I'm like, well, this will come around now full circle eventually?
Yes. You'll come back to the same place, but you'll have learned something and you're different.
Yeah, if you love something, you're meant to let it go. So
Yeah.
I run out on a load of commitment type situations
Sure.
in the knowledge that then that means in the future, the ones who really like me will come back. Are you telling me that doesn't always work?
No, I'm saying that in this story, she asked his permission. Louis says, absolutely not, and puts him into prison. But not just any prison, Jason.
A prison of
he
the
sends
heart.
him a prison of the mind, which is the worst prison. But also there's a prison called BL No, where he's put into, I think, solitary confinement. And then I don't know how much of this is... It sounds an awful lot like the Count of Monte Cristo.
It sounds like a delicious sandwich.
It does. He managed to like sneak through a chimney or something, and he's able to like get into different cells and get contact with other prisoners,
You're
including
getting the Count of Monte Cristo confused with Prison Break again.
Wait, yes, which is the didn't Alexander Dumas write Prison Break?
Yes, it's been a while since we've referenced that.
Yes, yeah, I know, and I think our new reference should be I think Lost. I've started watching Lost again during quarantine. Oh boy, am I ever back into Lost.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll catch up on Lost as well, and by season 5 it'll be predominantly Lost references.
Please do. But so he's rooting around the prison. He meets different prisoners in there, including apparently the man in the Iron Mask.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
The very same. So yeah, the man in the Iron Mask was a prisoner who was kept in solitary confinement for 40 years and always had his face covered and was like moved around different prisons in France. And no one knows who it is, but there's all these rumors, including that he was like Louis XIV's twin brother who would have had a claim to the throne. So Louis had him like kidnapped and kept in solitary, or the fact that he might have been, there was another theory that he was Charles II's son, who was also like kept in solitary for some reason, so that he couldn't.
That would be a weird one, because I feel like the twin brothers type situation, yeah, that's easily provable. Look, they're identical, although not all twins are identical. Being the son of someone is kind of like any of those girls who've come up to you, Kevin, over the years, going, "Look, this thing is the spit of you."
Sure.
And you're like, "Good luck getting a strand of my hair. Run away."
That's why I'm bold by choice.
Yeah. The Eddie Murphy solution.
Sure. But yeah, there was a couple of theories that it was like different childhoods of Charles, which seems like actually what we were talking about earlier on, the secret pact of Dover. It kind of implies that like as part of the deal for them joining up and fighting against the Dutch, as part of the negotiations, Charles was like, "I need you to take care of something for me. I have this son who's illegitimate, we've all been there, hands up. I don't want that son to come and challenge my rule at any stage, but I'm not a monster. I don't want to kill him. What I want you to do for me is take him to France, put a mask over his face, and just keep him out of sight for like 40 to 50 years until he dies. Give him anything he wants, absolutely anything, apart from any comforts or people to talk to or freedom."
Yeah. I mean,
it's the humane thing to do.
This sounds a lot like Ireland's how we used to deal with mental health in our country. Like, it's not so much just the French lords; it's pretty much anyone who was born with any form of a mental disability between the years of any time until now.
Yeah, pretty much. What I want you to do is put a mask over this person's face and just keep them locked up in terrible conditions until it just sort of takes care of itself. There was. Yeah, one of the other theories I read was that it was a man called Eustace d'Angers, which I think he has a rival against Titus Oates for best name in this whole thing. But
Eustace d'Angers.
Yeah, spelt danger.
Of course it is.
But pronounced d'Angers because he doesn't play by your rules. So Comont is released from that prison after 10 years. The whole time he would have been released if he'd signed some documents to like release some lands or something. And he says, "No. Not me. I'm staying in here with Eustace d'Angers. We're having a great time." And then he gets put into a worse prison and he says, "You know what? Give me the documents. I don't give a shit." And he moves over to England afterwards to join up with like the Stuarts' court because he fought with James in Flanders. And then after James is overthrown by William, Comont helps James's wife and his child escape back to France, and he brings them to Louis. Basically, he's kind of always been involved with James's court, and then he goes and fights for him in Ireland. But not anymore. He says Limerick can be taken by a bunch of roasted apples, and he pieces out. He heads back to France. So on the other side of the aisle, William wanted this war over as quickly as possible because after the Beachy Head thing, where the French temporarily controlled the English Channel, the people in England, they're freaking out. And they're like, William, what the hell are you doing? Get back here. We went all this trouble of throwing James out, putting you in charge, and now you're over hanging around in bogs, playing with the Irish. We need you back here to defend the good British Straits of Dover. And no one was taking him up on the Finglas Declaration.
Why didn't you say cliffs?
I don't know, because they were concerned about the whole thing, the Straits of Dover. They want the whole damn thing.
Yeah, but for reference.
They want the cliffs, the straits, the beaches, the whole dang thing, Jason. They're after the goddamn machine.
I'll tell you don't know what the song for this is? It'll be Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah, I feel like all the songs for this season have been quite pro-British, so one more will be fine. So no one's taken him up on the Declaration of Finglas. So he gives up waiting and decides to march west, and they arrive in Limerick around the 9th of August of 1690. He's got about 26,000 men with him. He delayed in Dublin for a while, thinking that the Irish would just surrender, which had given the Jacobites a fair amount of time to do up the defences of Limerick, and they had about 15,000 soldiers inside, as well as a lot of lay people.
Are you about to tell me the history of Irish dances at weddings?
Oh yes.
Am I getting?
This is exactly what's going to happen.
Amazing. I feel bad that I've ruined it for myself, possibly the listeners, but go on, tell me about these walls and a possible siege.
Well, so they've got 15,000 soldiers inside Limerick, and Patrick Sarsfield is somewhere out in Clare with about 2,500 soldiers. Spirits are high, Jason, in the Limerick camp. Even though they've just lost the Battle of the Boyne, they're happy about...
Most of the times you'll find the walls of Limerick, there's been a lot of spirits. Like our producer, Dan, who was at a wedding with him last year, and I gave him a touch of the devil's lettuce, and he managed to take his top off and river dance on the dance floor where Leo Varadkar had been there 30 minutes beforehand. It was quite the sight. He was basically Michael Flatley reincarnated. I don't know if he's dead or not yet, but
I don't think he is.
But Dan was so good on that dance floor that I feel like he stripped Flatley of his spirit.
I'm sure, somewhere at some party, Flatley was temporarily frozen in time.
Not even temporarily. I think this is an on-running thing, kind of like this is like Space Jam 2, but it's going to be Irish.
Are you saying that Flatley's in a coma somewhere?
Yes. Dan has
stolen his spirit.
Dan has taken all of his talents. And
right, is it like Space Jam?
Yeah, he's come over. He's reappropriated all of his abilities, and just as a reference point, Dan has, I can't name names, but a former Irish international rugby player, very well known. Our producer bet him in a dance contest on the Workman's dance floor in Dublin. It had started as a dance off. Dan, on the upper hand, rugby player has to go, I gotta pull something out of the bag to win this, so tries to pull off a handstand, falls over, kicks a girl in the head while doing so. And then, Brilliant. And the only proof we have of it is that that player acknowledged it the next day on Twitter, because he had to apologise to that person tweeting at him saying, this person kicked me in the head last night.
So I think anyone with about 5 minutes and a bit of a detective in them will be able to find that.
Oh, well, if that's the case, it was Brian O'Driscoll, and he was on yokes.
But, so, even though the Jacobites had just lost the Battle of the Boyne, spirits were high, Jason, because of the victories that Louis had made in France, but also because a man called Baljarrig O'Donnell had just returned to Ireland from Spain and been given his own contingent by Tyrconnell. I think he arrived just after the Battle of the Boyne. He'd missed that, but he was barreling down the Shannon on his way to Limerick. And there was an old prophecy that someone of the O'Donnell clan would drive the British out of Ireland permanently at a battle outside of Limerick. So people are looking at the stars and they're saying, this is it. It's all lining up now.
Like Orion's belt.
Exactly like Orion's belt. When he'd whip it off to give you a smack around the ear.
What kind of childhood did you have?
The kind where I knew not to cross Orion, okay?
Orion was a tough man.
He was. Actually, listen, Jason, the beating you got when you talked back was substantially worse than the beating you got if you didn't talk back. So, I learned my lesson. And, so the people of Limerick are amped up for this prophecy. The O'Donnells are back. They're going to chase the British out of Ireland. It's happening.
You're saying the British are Darrig doomed?
They're Darrig doomed, man. It's we're taking it from the horse's lips.
Don't look a gift horse in the lips.
So William arrived outside Limerick, ready for the siege. He took up residence in Cromwell's old fort outside of Limerick that had been built 40 years previous for the last siege of Limerick. So it's convenient that they left it there. They could just pick up again for round 2. William didn't have much in the way of ammo or artillery when he arrived, which, now that I think about it, that's pretty cocky. I didn't actually realize that. I think he really counted on the fact that they'd surrender by the time he got there. So he didn't bother bringing much with him.
If I act crazy enough, no one will want to fight me. So it's just like, I'll bite you in the face. Okay, don't. I'm not going to mess with this guy.
So he had a siege train coming behind him from Dublin. But I guess he arrived there like several weeks before that was due to arrive. But anyway.
Such is the problem with your road Airden scheduling that...
That's... He was standing at Limerick Station looking at the sign saying, next siege train in 20 minutes. And he was like, we got this sorted, lads. He was chatting to one of his mates. He looked back up again and said, next siege train in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it said, what we'll actually do is we'll get you a bus to Athlone. And then from Athlone, you can get a train in 2 weeks' time. Oh, but don't worry, we're not going to charge you extra for that bus that's going to take you extra hours to get to your location. Don't worry about that. Yeah. We've got that covered. It's like, it's not an option. It's like, hey, I got to the airport. Don't worry, we'll get you to Spain. But you just got to go down to the docks.
Tell me this, how are your sea legs? Well, he was standing there for 4 days. He finally saw a train coming along with a load of cannons on the back of it. And then, as it got up to the station, it just said, entering service soon.
This cannon not in service.
Yeah, but not in service, I get. Maybe they're on their way home. The one where it says entering service soon, that breaks my heart.
Yeah, why?
Don't tease me.
Yeah.
Don't say, I'm almost a bus. You're either a bus or you're not. Don't be like you just fucking missed it, man. So close. So, but there is a siege train coming from Dublin with cannons and ammunition and gunpowder, the whole shebang. So when our old friend Patrick Sarsfield finds out about this, he takes about 500 Jacobite troops and sneaks out from Clare across the Shannon and over to Ballyneety to try and ambush the siege train.
But it turns into a giant mess.
It wasn't so needy when they were done with it. But he was apparently led there by Michael Gallopin Hogan, who was a rapparee from East Limerick. I feel like you've got a note on Hogan. My name's Michael Gallopin Hogan.
Gallopin.
That was his name.
It was not.
It was not. No, that was his nickname.
Why?
I don't know, actually. I imagine it's because he loved ketamine.
He had beautiful long hair. He was afraid of flies. I don't know what's going on. What
I don't know. He was fast. I don't know. He had someone said, "Why the long face?" and that was it. But he was one of the rapparees from East Limerick.
He was one of the rubber bandits.
He was actually one of the original rubber bandits.
That's how out of touch I am. I think that's what you call people who would partake in R&B. Rapparees. It's the plurality of a rapper.
He was one of them rapparee fellows. But so on the night of the 13th of August, they sneak up on the siege train undetected, and they manage to blow the whole thing up. Allegedly, Hogan was given the honour of lighting the fuse on the explosives. So this whole event goes down in Jacobite history. It's like a Jacobite legend. But apparently it was actually quite difficult to destroy those cannons. And 6 out of the 8 cannons ended up being salvaged anyway and used at Limerick. But never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And they did destroy most of the ammunition and the carts. So that was all blown up.
Also, it sounds like a good tagline for this podcast. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah. But we talked a bit about the rapparees in one of the other episodes. They were the guys, rapparee was from the Irish for pike. They were the guys who were attacking Schomburg's men, the encampment outside of Dundalk.
Yes. I told you about that, I told you about the dude in my school who threw a fish into behind the radiator of the classroom?
No, he didn't.
No? Okay. When I was in secondary school, I'd say it must have been transition year, maybe fifth year. There was a teacher. I guess she was a sub. But one of the dudes came back from the river on his lunch break with a rotted pike.
Whoa.
Yeah, he had
Hang on. I don't want to interrupt your story already, but like, you can't say he came back from the river as if like he came back from lunch. That's not a normal thing. Not everyone who listens to this podcast grew up in Carlow. Not everyone went to the river. That wasn't one of the classes that they have.
Yeah, you go down to the river.
Maths, English, Spanish, river fishing.
No, it's not called river fishing. It's called SPHE, otherwise known as life. And it's where you learn how to get away with doing things you don't want to do. It's where you learn how to roll fat joints and take drags between your hand where it's all covered so that it covers from the wind, like a cool
Sure.
lad. It's where you learn how to open a can quietly so people can't hear you. It's where you learn to find that little space beside a lock, like back with the lock where no one is, so you can actually drink and smoke underage and shift girls. These are the things that CSPE and SPHE are meant to teach you.
It's SPHE, smoking, fighting, hucking, and education.
It was the education of all of that. Yeah, that's the.
Yeah.
No, this fella came back from. He went down to the river, I guess, at his lunch. He came back with a pike on a stick, and Tucker was his name. And he came back, and he on the stick comes up. So, now, in fairness, someone had left the window open. I don't know if that's dastardly or if it was just coincidence. I think maybe they thought of it in advance, but.
He had a man on the inside.
Being, September, October, and it being Ireland, it's fairly cold, so the radiators are on. And that radiator is right beside where the giant window is at the back of the class. So
also, I will say that's a classic Irish secondary school move. Radiators on, windows open.
Yeah. No sense, but it's happening. And now there's a pike sat on that radiator for maybe a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's. I feel like you have told me this story before, but I don't know. I don't think it's in this.
It's the worst. That was bad, although that's pretty shocking, but it's pretty easy. You're like, all right, we'll close that room. We won't use it for a day or two. We'll air it out.
Shut the room. Well, we didn't all go to multiplex schools, Jason, where you could just close a room. If you close the room in my school, everyone was just outside for the rest of the day.
Yeah, no, you just send them home. Latchkey kids. No, what else was bad was, I guess, the teachers that, the ones who you knew just gave up. Like, someone who was like, I became a teacher in my 20s to teach Irish because I enjoyed it, and then Ireland changed. Like, the generations changed, and it's not fun to be a teacher anymore, and no one wants to learn this, or even give it a fucking go. So then they find themselves being 60 years of age, or 55 in a few years from retirement, and the government are about to cut their retirement packages because of the recession, and they're like, do I retire now, or do I spend the last couple of years making decent money dealing with these absolute pricks? We used to take 2 phones, but at the time, you could call one against the other, but keep the phones right beside each other, like within the space of a centimetre or two, it would make a weird... It would sound like the intro to a Rage Against the Machine song. And that would just go and go and go and go. But the thing is, you could put 2 phones together, put them on anywhere you want, and somewhere else call them. So once you were doing that, you could hide the phones on a metal girder above the classroom, and then just randomly throughout the day, just be doing that. Even if you're not in the class. And you're like, eventually those teachers just give up. They just give up. And then we all turn around and go, it's ridiculous. Do you know what's ridiculous, Kevin? The fact that I had to study Irish for 13 or 14 years and I can't speak any of it. Do you know what it is? It's the system's fault. It's how they teach it. It's the system's fault.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Every single child in Ireland is a shithead, and they don't want to learn the language because you're given multiple opportunities to do it, and then you find yourself being 27, downloading Duolingo and begging all of your friends, "Will someone do this with me so I can have a conversation once a week?" And nobody will. Nobody will.
I asked you that once, and you could have just said a simple no. There's no need to hang me out to dry like this. But You're absolutely right. I downloaded Duolingo. I was like, this is my chance. Those 14 years where I had an opportunity to do it, it didn't stick. Not through any fault of my own. It was the system's fault. And now I've downloaded an app, and it still doesn't stick because I don't care.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we talked about the pikemen a little bit in one of the episodes, but I didn't go into where they came from. So initially, when James was going to come over and land in Ireland for his glorious return to the throne, Talbot wanted to raise an army for him, so we instructed each locality to get together a band of troops. But when James landed, it turned out that there wasn't enough of that sweet, sweet French money to actually go around. So a lot of the contingents weren't going to get paid. But they ended up, because it was in their best interest to fight anyway, because they'd end up with land, a lot of them formed bands called the Rapparees. So they're essentially like outlaws. But there were some early guerrilla forces, starting off, or not even starting off, but continuing a fine tradition of guerrilla forces in Ireland.
The Rapparees and the guerrilla forces. Are you talking about De La Soul?
I am, exactly. I'm glad you saw where this was going. But so there's like stories about how they would just put their pikes in bogs and then blend in with the town people as the British army passed through, and then as soon as they were gone, up come the pikes again. But before the Rapparees, there was a group called the Tories during the Cromwell years, coming from the Irish word Tore, meaning pursuer.
They were pretty well known, fairly notorious.
They were notoriously BIG. And as we covered in the Glorious Revolution episode, James kept disbanding the Parliament in order to try and get his religious freedom laws through, and it resulted in the constitutional crisis, which brought about the formation of a two-party system where you had the anti-James Whig Party on one side, and then on the other pro-James side, that group was called the Tories, after this group of Irish guerrilla forces, as a kind of insult because they were seen as being like pro-Catholic. So the modern Tory party that they have in England today got their name from a guerrilla force in Ireland in the Cromwell years.
Wow.
So it was initially thrown out as an insult.
I'd still use it as an insult.
Well, yeah, but it's still used as an insult today. And then I was trying to it'd be the same as if now Jeremy Corbyn started his own split-off Labour group and he came up with some name for it, but everyone just called him the IRA as a dig. And then after about 5 years, the IRA just stuck as the name, and that's what we know it as 200 years later. And I kind of wrote that as this is how crazy an idea this is. And then as soon as I finished, it's that's exactly what would happen. If Jeremy Corbyn starts his own political party in the next couple of years, they will be called the IRA. Or the RA for short. And then in 100 years, there'll be another podcast where two guys are and actually the RA party, who are currently in power, they got their name from a little known guerrilla warfare group in a country called Ireland, who used to be the Irish Republican Army.
Back when it was only two countries.
Yeah, exactly. Before the great Westmead-Mead divide of 2024. Or actually, a more current, as of yesterday, the Laois Offaly Kildare schism.
Yes, I'm recording them off. I thought, to be honest, if any county was going to try to secede, I feel like it would be Cork.
It would be. Frankly, every day I wake up and Cork is still a part of Ireland it's a shock. But so after the ambush, Gallopin Hogan and Sarsfield, they managed to sneak back into Limerick, and spirits are high, Jason. They've just destroyed William's siege train coming in. Things are looking up for the boys. But you can't keep a good man down, and King Billy just ordered another siege train from Waterford, and it arrives on the 27th of August, and they start battering the walls of Limerick. So by the afternoon of the 27th, there's a giant hole in the wall around Limerick, and thousands of Williamite soldiers start storming in through the deep. This is the breach of Helm's Deep.
Did you know that's exactly where I was going? This is in my mind. The second you started talking about this, I'm the Urukai leader is running towards the pit with the gunpowder. There's an elf shooting arrows at him. God, Kevin, you know how to paint a picture in my head.
I do.
Just
this is
a slight reference to the one movie I've seen.
Only the second one, not the other two.
You don't need it. You can get the rest through context. They brought the ring back to the Shire, yeah?
I think so.
They said, you know what? It seems like these forces are very strong and they really want this thing. Let's bring it back to Haydn.
They finally defeated the evil Bilbo Baggins, and then something else happened. I'm not sure. But so the Williamite forces, they get through the breach, but they're met by all these ramped up, jacked up Ubites, ready to fight to the last man. They're firing their muskets at the holes, chucking grenades. Apparently, even the citizens, the non-soldiers in the city, are looking down. They figure things are not going to go well for them if the Williamite forces win. So they join in the fight. They're apparently, every man and woman in the place is chucking stones down at the Williamites coming through the holes. They're just picking up pitchforks and stuff. They're arming themselves with whatever's around and fighting the forces back. And apparently this goes on for like 4 hours until eventually the Williamites had to yield and they moved back from the wall after losing about 3,000 men.
Ooh, worse than the Battle of the Boyne.
This is worse than the Battle of the Boyne, and this is the Jacobites' last stand, kind of. Not really. I guess they've still got other places around the country. There's still contingents in like Cork, Galway, Sligo, but this is their main force, and they've just fought William to a standstill. They've pushed him back.
Do you know what I've just realised?
Yeah.
That might make no sense. Just when you were saying their last stand, this is how my mind works. It went, I should stop listening to this incredibly important piece of information that Kevin's trying to give me now so I can follow this podcast and finally finish it. My brain went to, do you remember Mondo from Fair City?
Was he the giant gingerbread man from Shrek?
No, he's George McMahon, the actor. But his big thing was Custer's Last Stand, which is what I remember.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? The lead from that is Mondo from Fair City. It was his big break after Fair City, I believe. Or maybe concurrently. But Custer's Last Stand was a TV show set in Ireland where there was a young lad who grew up, wanted to be a stand-up comedian.
Oh.
He was from Belfast, and his best friend is that funny-looking fella from Man About Dog. But yeah, it's his rise to becoming a young comedian in Ireland. I remember seeing that as a kid and going like, oh, that's very good. And it's obviously in reference to Custer's Last Stand as to like General Custer. But that reference shouldn't have made sense to me as a child.
I was just going to say, like, why were you as a child so educated on the Wild West?
I don't know. But then like in hindsight...
Me as a child would have seen that and been like, oh yes, he obviously hates custard. Or he loves custard. He feels strongly about custard some way.
Either way, this is the last time he'll have it.
Yes.
But thinking back now, I don't know how I always knew that, even as a kid, but also never thought, like, this is a terrible name for a show because no one's going to get this. This is a show that's made for children about a guy doing stand-up comedy. Like, this is not... It has
Wait, why was it made for children?
I thought it was a British children's television series.
Children shouldn't be exposed to that level of desperation and neediness, as you would see in a stand-up comedian's rise to mediocrity.
2 seasons, 13 episodes. I say we would...
The good British way.
Spin-off podcast. Shite Talk, Custer's Last Stand.
Custard's penultimate stand.
I think... But I was in hindsight, I got that reference. I shouldn't have. Nobody else who was watching that show would have got that reference. So why was it called that? It had nothing to do...
Loads of people would. It's a very famous battle or stand.
But it has nothing to do with a kid in Northern Ireland trying to be a stand-up comedian. It's just
was his name Custard?
I don't believe so. I don't know. I'd have to go back.
I feel like that's a pretty crucial piece of information.
Yeah, but you're listening to the wrong podcast, Kevin, if you're trying to come here for information.
Although, if the guy's name in real life wasn't Custer, it just means that he invented a character's name around this concept of Custer's Last Stand.
I think he came up with it. He was like, this would be a good show name. And they're like, oh, so what it's about? We can't make a show about custard. Last is a bad thing because we might get cancelled too early. Stand-up comedy? Is it man doing stand-up comedy?
Yes.
That works. Is it that silly looking fella from Fair City? Yes. Okay, well,
Perfect.
I have a feeling his schedule will be wide open. Was it that the character's name was Custer? It was Jamie Custer.
Of course his name was Custard. That's the whole point of the title.
That's crazy. That
is great. That does mean that like the actor came up with that name, or the director or someone involved with the project was like thought of that pun and then named a character Custer so that he could make a show called Custer's Last Stand. That is ludicrous, but also it is the exact sort of thing that I would do. You
want to write a TV show called Twin Iskeen just because you think that the term twin and Iniskeene are fun together.
It's 100% the same thing. I thought of the idea Twin Iskeen, and then I thought, what would that mean? And I worked backwards from there. Yeah. It's a twin who lives in Iniskeene.
You barely thought back from there. You sent me a message going, so I've thought of this thing. It's Twin Iskeen. It's about it's 2 brothers who are twins that live in Iniskeene. You left that with me.
I'm the big ideas man, okay? I'm the guy who'd walk into a room and say, I've got an idea for a show, Custer's Last Stand, and the guy's name is Custer. And then the network would say, interesting, what is it about? And by that stage, I would have already left.
Yeah, you call Jason, time to shine.
What if he's a stand-up? I don't care. I don't give a shit. I've already got my money in the bank. The project's greenlit. Whatever you want. 2 seasons, 13 episodes? Fine. Well, this is not Custer's last stand. But this is the end of William's part. It's just the 31st of August at this stage. William gives the order to retreat back from Limerick across the Shannon, and he decides to leave. He goes back to England and then on to like the wars in Europe, which, again, we've referenced the 9-Year War a lot in this series, but it's this like huge, giant, all-encompassing battle across Europe. And while all of his troops and men are fighting against the French all across Europe, he's in rainy Limerick, fighting against a load of Jacobites who just want their fields back.
Yeah.
Not to downplay what was happening in the War of the Two Kings, but you can understand where like the rest of his generals in mainland Europe are like, and where are you again? We're here in the front lines in Flanders, and you're in the Limerick?
Yes, but Kevin, I have lived in important places, times, when great events were decided. Who owned that half rood of rock?
And then Homer's ghost appeared to me and said, I made the Odyssey of such local things. Don't you... I was going to say my hometown man, but...
Yeah. I never get to... You cut me off before I got to say, because usually I would just say Ballyrush and Gordon, and then someone will go,
sure.
What do you mean by that? I'm like, oh, hold on a second. You've never read Patrick Kavanagh's epic? What year did you even do the Leaving Cert?
Which was actually... That was one of the titles of one of the other episodes.
What year did you even do the Leaving Cert?
No, Ballyrush and Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon, yeah.
But for William's people back in the Dutch Republic, as far as they saw, it was like a tactical move. He went off to dethrone James. They thought, that's great. That means the English are going to be on our side in the wars to come. And now all of a sudden, it's like 2 years later, and he's in some place called Limerick, fighting against somebody called the Jacobites in order to like get better land rights for Protestants in Ulster. Meanwhile, they're having to fight off like Louis's main forces in the rest of Europe. At this stage, they want him back. So he hands over the efforts in Ireland to a man called Godert de Ginkle.
Which is, comparatively to the rest of the names in this podcast series, a big ball of shite.
Oh, come on. It's better than Neil McNeil and James Fitzjames. Godert de Ginkle? I love it.
No. James.
Okay.
James to James.
Well, anyway, listen. De Ginkle is now in charge of the operation in Ireland. The people inside the Limerick, they just fought off the Williamite forces, especially after the Battle of the Boyne defeat. This was a huge win for the lads. But in September of that year, Cork was then captured by John Churchill, which is the name. I think we talked about him before. He was one of James's top dogs. And then immediately, as soon as William landed in England, John Churchill defected over. His dad was also called Winston Churchill.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. John Churchill's wife, Sarah, was Dick Talbot's wife's sister. So Churchill's wife and Talbot's wife, they were sisters.
Like, I wish we lived in a society like that still.
Well, but also John's sister, Arabella Churchill, which is a great name, was James Fitzjames's mother. She was James's mistress.
Ah, yes, Arabella. She's made of outer space, and her lips are like the galaxy's edge, and her kiss the colour of a constellation falling into place. Is that the same one?
That is, if I don't find a better option, that Arabella song is going to be the intro song for this episode. So I guess this is just one example of how incestuous this whole thing was. That Churchill and Talbot's wives were sisters, and then Churchill's sister was James's mistress.
Churchill's sister was also his wife, who was actually Talbot's mother and goddaughter at the same time.
She was also the neighbour and the local mayor.
And the butler.
But,
in the conservatory with an axe.
But you also got to think maybe that was part of the reason why Churchill had abandoned. I don't know what the system was back then, but like, so Arabella Churchill was the mother of 4 of James's children. So at that stage, it's not like I guess they kind of had this idea that the mistresses would sort of be a one-night stand sort of thing, and then you'd accidentally get one pregnant, and you'd be like, okay, all right, I'll take care of you. I can't give him my name, but he'll be James Fitzjames. But he had 4 children with her. At that stage, it's like a steady thing. And she's the sister of one of his main...
Fool me once, shame on you.
Sure, yes.
Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, here, come on. Fool me 4 times, I should really start wrapping it up.
It's time for a revolution.
Yeah, 4th time's the charm.
So, with Dick Talbot in France, Sarsfield had taken control of the Jacobite forces, and in December he consolidated his control. He arrested several members of the peace faction, mostly French officers, which, in terms of optics, is never good, I guess, if you're arresting members of the peace faction.
Yeah, but also, calling yourself the peace faction is, it's a bit, come on now, that's ridiculous. Faction, isn't it? That's known for being faction fighting. That's what a faction is, a group of people that fight. You cannot call yourself a peaceful faction.
Sure. So, Sarsfield's in charge. He went over James II's head and he asked Louis XIV directly for provisions for the siege.
He asked for direct provision.
He asked for direct provision, the hottest asylum system of 1690.
He was like, it's temporary. We'll set it up now. Things will get better in the future. I swear to God, by 25 years' time, people will not still be living in these situations.
It's a temporary measure. So he goes over James's head and he asks for provisions directly. And then while he's at it, he asks Louis to get rid of Talbot and also James Fitzjames. So Talbot at this time is in France. And James Fitzjames's dad, James II, is also in France.
Oh, so it's kind of like the Lonely Island.
How do you mean?
Stop those 2 guys. Because it's just Andy Samberg.
He's Andy Samberg in them.
Yeah.
But in January of the next year, 1691, Talbot returns. Old Fighting Dick returns victorious. He comes up the Shannon with 3 ships full of provisions, weapons and cash. Which I guess are also provisions, but...
Taking the term, just throw money at it, very literal.
Oh yeah, every ship that comes over here just throws money at it.
Yeah. And it's you've taken that to be the literal context. No, we meant buy more ammunition and guns. No, I'm going to chuck a load of coins at them.
It's called gun money, Jason. You put it in a cannon, you fire it at the enemy, ka-ching. But James had also sent a letter over with Talbot, making Patrick Sarsfield the Earl of Lucan.
Matthew Tallon.
Yeah, Matthew Tallon is the current Earl of Lucan. But this was an attempt by James to calm Sarsfield down, give him a little something, just get him to cool the jets. I don't think he had the power to do this whatsoever. So James is in exile. The Jacobite forces are on the verge of defeat, and James is like, you know what? Hey, how would you like to be the king of made-up town?
Yes, always. I'd revel in it.
You're there. You're besieged by the enemy on all sides. You have to write an angry letter to Louis, being like, get rid of these 2 jokers. Put me in charge. I'm here on the ground. I'm going to bring this home for you. And then you get another letter from that side being like, hey, how would you like to be the mayor of Kilkenny? What about that? Or the president of Belfast?
Well, yeah, it's my dream job. I want a title. I want an ostensible role of authority, but most of the pressure is kind of taken off me. I don't really have much to say, but it's more of I just walk around a bit, tapping people on shoulders with swords and
sure,
and saying things like "Let it begin, commence." I don't know what kings do, but things like that. I just want to once a week. Sure. I would just want to bellow something. I never get to bellow anything.
Well, I suppose Sarsfield had been. Initially, at the start of this story, he was trying to get the lands in Lucan back. Those were his ancestral lands.
Do you mean his incestual lands?
His incestual lands, exactly. And then again in May, Louis sent over another contingent of ships. He's really sending good money after bad at this stage, but he sends more troops down, money and men, provisions, as well as a new commander for the forces, the Marquis of Saint-Ruth. Oh. So at this stage, Talbot's back and him and Sarsfield are at odds again. Both of them want to take command of the troops, and Louis says, what about this 3rd guy? He can be in charge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. No, it's most of the time now, you kind of realize when you have an idea of what might happen in history, when it's a 2-choice option, like A or B, always be prepared for secret option C.
Yeah, but the trouble is, if you're always prepared for secret option C, there's a secret option D that you're not prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, the war takes a break for the winter. At this time, I suppose at any time, but at this time especially, it's very difficult to feed and move troops during the winter. So they kind of go into a hiatus. Like we saw with Schomburg in Ulster that time, they kind of just shut down after September and make camp for the season. And the same again after the Battle of the Boyne. After in September, October, everything just has to be done until the following year.
Whereas I would have played it like golf, where you're kind of like, it's a gentleman's agreement. This is where the ball was. This is where we'll play from. I would have sent everyone home for 6 months. Come back when the weather's better. We will pick this up from where it is. No, there's no need for all of us to stay here for 6 months.
That's pretty much what's happened. I mean, it's very much a gentleman's agreement where they're like, we're not going to, okay, listen, it's cold outside. We're not animals. So everyone just take a long 5. We'll hibernate for a couple of months. We'll meet you back here next year. Yeah, that's the origins of the Tide 5. And just like the Ginkle, we'll have to leave it there for this episode because this is ran on. It's now looking like it's going to be a 6-part thing. But we'll leave it there for this week and we'll pick up the last part of it for real this time because it's all recorded now. We'll pick up the last part of it next week.
Yeah, see you all then. Good luck.
All right, good luck.